Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss the women's basketball collegiate recruiting process and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Coach Rodney Rogan. Rodney played for 4 years at Millsaps College. He started his coaching career in 2010 as an assistant at Millsaps College on the men's side. He made the transition to the women's side in 2013. And from 2013 to 2019, Rodney was an assistant at Nebraska Omaha. From 2019 to 2023, he was the head coach at Rhodes College. And in 2023, he found his current home as the head coach at Johns Hopkins University. And in his first year at Hopkins, the Blue Jays had an impressive 26-4 record and made it to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA Division III tournament. And he was just named the D3Hoops.com Region 5 Coach of the Year. So congratulations on that, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a fun year. It was nice for the team and the staff to get that recognition from D3 Hoops.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so let's just get into it. So when you see a student athlete for the first time, what's the first thing you notice about them? What kind of draws you in?
I think how hard they play is going to be something that's really important. What's the mistake response is something else, but really just seeing like, are they out there with a lot of effort? Are they leaving everything on the floor? And that can maybe be a little subjective, but you know what you see. And so I just want someone I don't think I'm gonna have to ask to play hard or to give that extra effort. So that's one of the biggest things and kind of the first things that will jump out at me when we're out seeing a kid for the first time.
Cool. Yeah. And I actually saw you all play this past year. And that was one thing I noticed. You all played hard, played hard, ran hard, everything. It was just really cool to watch. So I can definitely see that. And in terms of like skills, what if you had like a non-negotiable skill that you needed to have, is that kind of what you would say, or what would you say in terms of like for you, a non-negotiable that kind of makes it or breaks it for you?
Yeah, I think, that I go back and forth between it's like playing hard a skill. And it is just like communication is a skill, you have to work on and all that. But if we were talking in terms of, maybe a traditional, I would say like I really want to see people put the ball through the hoop, through the basket, and whatever form that is, whether you're a post player, how are you finishing inside? And we can work on a lot of things, maybe you need to get it higher off the glass and all that, but I'm really like drawn to people who can make shots, because to me that's kind of the name of the game. So that's the other skill. But yeah, I think definitely the effort, knowing that we can count on you to leave everything on the floor is one. And then if we're talking traditional, being able to make shots, that's number one, or 1A.
Yeah. I mean, the points is how you win the game. So I definitely get that. All right. So if you think about, so we're recording in the middle of April. What is you and your staff, what are you all focused on right now in terms of recruiting?
What we're focused on when we're going to be out recruiting is the things that we've talked about already in terms of like playing hard and really shooting, whether that's, kind of 1 through 4. And if, we're fortunate, we get a 5 who can even make shots out at the 3-point line. I want to be able to put players in positions to make shots, whether it's in transition, whether it's in our half court offense. And, if a team makes mistakes, you want to be able to knock down that open shot. And we don't want it to be a reason because you're left open for a reason. I think we can create shots in transition throughout our offense. So knowing that you can count on people to make shots makes the game so much easier. It makes me look like a better coach. If people just make shots or a player just makes a play, oh, that was good offense. No, she just did that.
Yeah.
So we're going to really kind of look for that. And that's even when we do our research on the backside in terms of shooting percentages and how reliable that can be sometimes with high school and different things. It varies. But we really want to see that. And then just it's hard and I think maturity level is different and we can all grow, but I really do look for the body language piece on the court. And there's times when you get upset with yourself, which I see players. I still want them to be able to get back and make the next play. But I think if they're a little extra demonstrative towards like maybe a teammate's mistake, that's something that will give me a little bit pause. It's not going to necessarily have me scratch someone off the list, but we have to do our research to figure out who they are, and maybe no one's told them what that looks like. And so I don't want to write a kid off because maybe they just have to grow, mature a little bit. But I also know that I do like the ones who who don't do that because you're starting from a very good spot.
hmm Yeah, and from all the conversations that I've had, it's more so of like I need to know where you're at, like in this moment. Just it's
Hmm.
just a knowledge thing, not that it's gonna be like tip the scale one way or another, but just
Yep.
knowing kind of, and it's hard too when you go see a kid for the first time. It's like you're watching a snapshot of who they are as a player, and it's not
Hmm.
necessarily who they've been or who they will be. Most of my conversations, it hasn't been a hard like, oh, this would definitely cross a name off the list. It's more of
Yeah.
understanding the context and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I would hate to someone to meet me one time and think, maybe I had a bad day. Maybe Chipotle didn't put enough chicken on my burrito, maybe I'm just upset. So that's the same way I look at, whether they're 15, 16 years old, whatever. It's just like there's a lot going on. So I think we would be foolish just to say this is what this person is if the first time we've seen them. If you've
hmm
seen them a whole summer, and you see that kind of attitude stuff creep in a lot, then it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. But certainly the first time I see someone, I'm not going to just write them off because maybe they made a face when their teammate didn't catch a pass.
hmm Yeah. And so if you could think about like your experience, not only at Hopkins, but other places you've been to, in this answer, like, can you talk about like your recruiting cycle? Like who are you focused on right now? What classes are you focused on right now? And what
Mm.
that looks like for you?
It's it's very different here at Hopkins. Hopkins and Rhodes are similar in terms of maybe the academic requirements are a little bit different than at University of Nebraska Omaha, just in terms of, AP courses. Yeah, at Omaha, when I was a Division I assistant, your range is a little bit bigger, and I think that's what's great about different colleges around the country. Whereas, at Omaha, I had more people who were the first person in their family to go to college, and then you're helping them in a different kind of way. Whereas I think at Hopkins and Rhodes, we're not having too many people who are the first in their family to go to college. A lot of times their parents or siblings went to similar type schools. So the timeline is very different at Division I, as there, we're seeing people in eighth grade, ninth grade, we're throwing out offers to a lot of these players. And it's been a while since I've been at Omaha, but you're seeing some of these players that you recruited in the NCAA tournament. And then some of them you recruited when you feel like you first got to Omaha and they're just now finishing up. And I'm like, some players at Creighton, watching them play, and it's like, wow, I've known you since you were like, I mean, I don't know them now, but we were recruiting them as a freshman.
hmm
So you're throwing out those offers and you're planning it out on your board. It's like, all right, we have this many offers for the freshman class, sophomore, and high school and different years, and you're really mapping that out with your roster, and when the roster changes. Whereas here at Hopkins and Rhodes, we're really focused right now on 25s, so people who are finishing up their junior year, and then a little bit with the 26, where my mind is, if we see someone, we get these emails, we're going to put them in our database. And then this weekend, try to see some of those players. But it's going to be really hard to be as in depth with like the 27s and all that. Like we will see them, and we would love the chance to get them on campus as well with some of our camps, but it's so different because then we have to do the early read. I don't know if it's early read or pre. early read, pre-read at different places. And that's going to open up in June for the people who are juniors now. So then we can get our first glance at like, okay, is this going to be something that's going to work for both sides academically? So it's a lot of focus right now on finding as many 25s as we can who we think are going to fit academically. And then hopefully we can pull that down and with what we're looking for athletically. So it starts with academics, certainly at Hopkins, and mainly with high school juniors now.
Hmm. And so, speaking from your experience at Nebraska, what so that recruiting cycle is obviously very different than Division III.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that offer process? And granted, I will say like it's been a little bit of time since you've been there, so things may have changed. So I'll put that caveat out there.
Yeah.
But if you can speak to like how that process would work from your all's end of like offering, ninth graders,
Mhm.
10th graders, things like that.
Yeah, it's knowing, who's going to, and back then it was maybe, I mean, we had our own shared transfers before the portal and all that. So your team shapes out differently, but you just know like, okay, these people are going to be graduating on, this person might be a red shirt. So you know that you'll have four scholarships available. And you say, hey, we want three to be high school students. We might want to go JUCO or say for a transfer. And so when they're freshmen, you might think in 4 years, you'll have four spots. Obviously, it's going to change. So you can, you know, you don't throw out as many offers, maybe. We did not, but you could throw out as many as you want. And for us, we weren't a school that's going to maybe offer two people and say you have until, June 10th, and whoever picks first is going to get the scholarship. But there are those ones who do that where it's like they want to know who's going to be in their class very early on. And so you're offering them and you're hoping that you can get them to commit. We would occasionally have someone who commit in 10th grade or 11th grade, and then others are waiting because they're mulling their offers, or maybe they want that bigger offer to a Big East school or maybe a Power Five school. So you give those offers early with some of these freshmen because you see how good they are, and you
Hmm.
know that if Creighton came along or South Dakota State came along, sometimes it'd be tougher for us to get them. And so you want to be early, and you want to try to set your roster as much as possible. Again, it's been 5 years since I've been there, and with how the transfer stuff is going now, it's a lot tougher because there's not as much. There's still the emphasis on high school kids, but you have to know that your roster is going to change. So I think a lot of coaches are looking at it, unfortunately, as a year-to-year thing with your roster. And so that's with the transfers or even going the JUCO route. So I think, if for a lot of people who are looking, even for our level, if you don't have that offer, by the end of the summer of your junior year, um, you're probably not going to get that Division I offer. And so it can still happen, but and now with the transfers and everything, it's really not going to go as much. So see how the extra COVID year changes things. So that's the one thing where it's like, okay, you have to know kind of where you're at, and that's okay. You can play and be successful in different places, but knowing that junior year summer is going to be really key for if you have Division I aspirations.
Hmm. Yeah, and because it's not like, oh, it's really big because it's like your last year, but it's really big because there is kind of a timeline on how many roster spots will even be available at the Division I
Hmm.
level. And a lot of people that I've come across have had, Division I aspirations, and I talk to them and it's like March of their senior year and they haven't had any offers.
Hmm.
It's just like that's where the conversation is. Well, like you don't have anything right now. I don't think
Yeah.
anything is coming. Especially at that level. Not saying that
Yes.
there aren't places for you, but it's really hard because there's only so many spots, right?
There's only so many spots. And I think even for us, back then, the time I was there, I think there was only a couple like late high school signees that we made when I was at Omaha. So it is one of those things where it's like if you feel like you got to go Division I, maybe it's a JUCO thing first, and then you can look and see what you can get from there. But certainly if you're playing your senior year, hey, have faith in yourself, bet on yourself, but the odds are very similar, usually looking elsewhere.
hmm Yeah, I'd love to know the statistics on like people who go into the transfer portal and
Hmm.
who like don't end up finding a home
Yeah.
because
I,
I don't know. Do you know? I don't know.
I,
I
I
just I
don't
just threw
know.
that out there. Okay.
But you've seen tweets where it's like, okay, there's this many people in the portal, this many spots, and then these are people who are, still left in the portal. And so I know that can be like, scary to try to see where you're going to land, and because people obviously leave for different reasons. So I don't know those statistics, but I know a lot of people, it seems like a lot of people maybe don't find that perfect home that they were looking for.
hmm Yeah, and I just talked about this idea of like um you I would hope, people don't go to college thinking if I don't like it, I can transfer because I
Hmm.
don't think that's always a positive outlook because, you become part of a family and then you have your own community and then to just leave is really hard on everything outside of even on a basketball level too. Like
Yeah.
that's really hard to do. So, um, yeah, but that's an aside. We could talk about transferring all day. Um,
Yeah.
but if you were to think about well, I guess in your experience, because Hopkins is a little different, this was your first year. So in your experience coaching, maybe at Rhodes would be the best case study. But like, what is the percentage of the athletes on your team that you made first contact with versus they made first contact with you?
Yeah, let's see here. I'm trying to think. A lot of it is get first contact from them. Because what I found is that they have an idea of what they want to be able to do academically, and then what school offers that and also offers a great basketball experience. And so I'd say over half um, have come from first contact from them. And
hmm
then others are like, I know this program. I talked to their AAU coach, and I'm like, here's what we're looking for. You know what the academic requirements are here at Rhodes and now Johns Hopkins. Who do you have? And so then we can go see them practice and
hmm
get their schedule and things like that. So I'm fortunate that these student athletes are so like focused from a young age, and whether it's they take the standardized tests or their schools, and they are seeking out that next step. And so they will reach out to schools like, now us, maybe UA schools, different academic schools. Same thing with Rhodes if they want to maybe stay in the South, the Mid South, and we'll get reached out, via email. And so that's huge when we're going through all of this because we get so many emails, and so it's important for them to make sure they email me, make sure they email our assistants, and like be persistent because I'm not I tried to get to every single email, and people probably get email from me 2 months later when I'm caught up. But I'd say it's making those connections with the programs that and high schools that you've recruited from successfully, and then I'm like, hey, who do you have? And so you're building that, just like I'm building it up at Hopkins, I had to build it up at Rhodes, and I know I can go to certain high school like I don't want to say this high school because people might go down there, but it's in Houston. I'm from Houston, and I talk to their coach all the time, and I've had some players from there. So it's one of those things where it's like that this kind of fits what you're looking for. So you
hmm
always have those schools that you go to. But certainly the emails will work because if you send out a nice written email, you got your height, you got your stats, you send that transcript right away, GPA, like we're ready to go. And so it's definitely mixed. And I think the more I'm here at Hopkins, the more we'll know who we can connect with. But the emails definitely work when kids reach out to us.
Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest like bang for your buck recruiting thing that you do? And I can maybe guess based on that answer, but I don't know if that would change. So yeah, what would you say is like that biggest bang for your buck?
Um, well, certainly these summer tournaments or spring, whatever we are, spring tournaments are
I always
helpful.
felt like it's basketball season, which is winter. Let's just say it's winter, and
Yeah,
then it's summer because that's how I always thought about it. Like that was my
yeah,
year. So
yes, yeah. The live period is just creeping up.
Yeah.
And so it's like where it gets a little confusing. But I definitely think that because with so much more video now, that is a great tool for us to be able to recruit, especially during the season when it's hard to go see people from that aren't within a short radius. That's going to be huge to see people on film, to see what they have, so then we can at least get a general idea of what they do, and it's helpful if we know where they're from, so then we can judge the competition kind of appropriately. So that's going to be very big for us, just in terms of time and with, in terms of the funds. But then these tournaments are very important because you can see so many at once. So the money or the investment needs to also go to seeing people in person. Like it's so important to be able to see student athletes in person. So obviously you want to get them on campus with our camps, but being able to go, an hour and a half to Mannheim and be able to see, 20, 30 student athletes that we've have had contact with, and then even meet more, is a pretty good use of our recruiting pool
Hmm.
that we have, which is not huge. I know it's Hopkins, but it's not unlimited, not unlimited funds to go out and see people.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a good point too of just like in terms of resources. And I interviewed Matt Donahue, the Catholic coach, and one thing that he had said was just like always send the schedule, because if we don't see you at the tournament, we can usually like pay for the video, like you said, and we can
Yeah.
always go and watch it back. But you had mentioned like sending the email and being persistent about it. And like some of the information that you said was like transcript, GPA, highlights, or like game, full game, half game. Is there anything else that student athletes can do to kind of stick out to you when they're sending that email?
I think if it's, very well written, if it's, trying to make a personal connection, even if it can be slightly copy and paste it, but then make sure your paragraph that you talk about the school, you know that you can reference something specific, especially if you can tell if someone's done their research, or if they maybe know a player on the team, if they say, hey, we watched your conference championship game, or we watched your NCAA tournament game. I've seen the style of play that you guys um, will go out there with. And so I think that way, if you can personalize a little bit, it's okay to email a bunch of coaches that you're interested in. But if you have like maybe honed in on a certain area that you want, or schools that you like, it should be pretty easy just to give a little personal touch, where it's just not copy and paste it 100%. It can be
Hmm.
80% copy and pasted, but maybe one little paragraph, a couple sentences that it's personalized will help. And then, have someone else read through it before you send it, so they get your name right. Sometimes I get emails like, "Dear Coach Hopkins," and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, well, you know.
They are associating you are Mr. Hopkins. So.
You know what? All right,
Yeah.
that maybe I am. Maybe I am. So I think that's a good way to help you stand out apart from those things that we look for. And if you don't have them, if you send out an email, we like to highlight, we like this, and be like, hey, have you done our questionnaire? Can you send over your transcript? That's kind of the first thing that we'll start with. A lot of times, even before I even watch the highlight, I'll click on the profile or see what the email is. I'm like, hey, we need you to do our questionnaire here in our recruiting software. And two, I need the transcript, because in the past I've watched highlights. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to call this kid. This is awesome. And then I see that we just have different academic requirements. And I always try to be careful with my language, because you can go anywhere and get a great education that suits you, and go out and make a huge difference in the world, or whatever you want to do. So I don't sometimes it's like higher. I don't like to use that kind of language, but obviously, certain schools require certain courses to take and all that. So that's just an aside.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you said that, and I appreciate that. And I'm taking that in, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I need to change my language too, because that is completely true what you just said. And one is not like higher or lower, better or worse. It's just like, is this appropriate for you to get you where you want to
Hmm.
go, or is this not appropriate for you?
Yeah,
Um,
of
so yeah, so I appreciate you saying that.
course. Yeah.
So when you're talking to, so it sounds like the checkpoints are you see them or they contact you, you watch them, you like them from a basketball standpoint. Let's pursue this a little bit further.
Hmm.
Like what is that next step to you? Is it like a phone conversation?
Yeah, phone conversation, and now with texting, I always like to send a text right when I see it, especially if it's someone that we're interested in. I'm trying to do this thing where if something is on my mind or I need to do it, I do it right away versus like, all right, let me just handle this one email that's in front of me, so then I can know at least I made contact with this student athlete or whatever the email is. And so then we can try to set up a phone call. And sometimes people want to do Zoom. I used to do more initially to like talk to the parents first or right after the first phone call, make sure I get the parents on the phone. But I also like to build a relationship with the student athlete, because then I think we can know, like, we set the tone that the recruitment process is the student athletes. Like, of course, family matters, and we want everyone to be the sport, but I certainly appreciate when, all things considered equal, there's so much that goes into it with funds and scholarships and all that, but knowing that the decision is hopefully going to be theirs. So building that relationship with them, knowing that I can talk with them, and then making sure the parents are also comfortable with the coaching staff and with us. So that's kind of how we start that process of building the connection with text messages, phone calls, and then as it progresses, just opening up the floor to, hey, we would love to get you on campus at some point. And having that be a pretty wide range of dates, provided we're in town and don't have anything scheduled.
Hmm. And so at Hopkins, you all recruit nationally, correct?
Yeah.
So how do you all navigate like somebody from California wanting to come to see campus, which is in Baltimore? Like how do you all
Hmm.
navigate that process when I'm sure like you said, like funds are not unlimited on either side, and
Yeah.
that's a plane ticket, right? And
Hmm.
a multiple day stay. So yeah, how do you all navigate that?
We kind of give them a range of dates, that they can come, and we try to be pretty accommodating with that. Um, if there's something on the calendar, it's like, hey, this weekend we cannot do it, and ideally, they can at least get there during the week on a Friday or maybe even a Monday, so they can get the campus feel, go to a class, get a tour. I think we have tours on Saturdays, but spaces are limited and not on Sundays. So ideally, they can get a piece of the academic life when they come. So we want to give them dates, times that are best, and then get them on campus. And I think we also can kind of set it up, whether it's maybe someone else in their recruiting class, different position, ideally, that they that they can come in and also get a feel for who they would potentially be playing with. And so if people are going to make that investment in their of time and money, we want to, obviously give them a great visit, and be very present for that. But I certainly want them to find a time that's best for them. And if it's important for us, we'll make it work for them to get on campus, and meet everyone and see the team, see everything that goes on. We have a lot of great programs here, so it's important if they're going to come, that we have some flexibility with them. Sometimes it's the day we get back from our second round NCAA tournament game. We got back that morning. And then Sunday morning, we had a recruit on campus, in a couple hours. And it was like this
Oh wow.
super exciting win. And then
Yeah.
you're also, it's like the weekend was draining, but it was fun because you won two games. But then it's like, okay, well, they'll be here in 2 hours, so let's get some food, let's plan it out, and let's do this visit. So we can make it work. That's what you do. You make it work. We of course want to have the balance of our staff, and we're not going to kill ourselves out here, but that's kind of what we do. We want to get people on campus.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember when I was at Shenandoah, we lost in the playoffs at some point, and I
Hmm.
was so done. And we were just like, "Oh, we have this visit tomorrow. We don't want to do this visit." Like that was
Yeah.
honestly our approach. We're like, we don't want to do this." But I mean, it was a great visit.
Hmm.
It was fantastic. Loved her, loved her mom, and she ended up coming to Shenandoah and actually
Yeah.
is playing there now and has done really, really well. But it was just, yeah, I just remember that feeling. But it was like probably opposite for you. You're like on this high and we were on this low of just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing right
Yes.
now?
Yeah, you do have those. It can, it can be tough, I think with us, our visits, Division I, they have a lot of visits, and those officials were weekend affairs, and it's
Hmm.
like totally like, all right, who's picking them up, who's coming, and we're not out here, flying people out. We're not doing that. We'll eat on campus, we'll get that feel of it, but it's not like, all right, Friday through Sunday, here's what we're doing, and it's all
Hmm.
day. And so it's a balance of showing people a great visit. And it can be a long day visit. They can stay sometimes with our players. If our players can host, which we try to do if it's possible, but I also don't want to put our players out. They're in the middle of the season, they have their academics, but we also make sure that they get to spend time with the players. But you're right, it can be something where it's like, gosh, we have this. I need to go watch film. Probably needed to watch more film, but that's how it goes.
Hmm. And so when you're either talking to a student athlete for the first time or you're doing your process of like you vetting from your end to make sure that they'll fit in with your team and what you have going on, what are maybe do you have like some questions that you like to ask student athletes when you're talking to them, either for the first time or on a visit?
Hmm. Yeah, I like to find out what they're interested in. Not just basketball. What do you like to do, for fun? Do you have a job? Just I like to also just kind of make sure we can have a relaxed conversation. Let's have some fun, show some humor, and then also just kind of relax them, help them be relaxed through this process. It's a big decision. I kind of don't like to pressure people into things, and sometimes I've gone back and forth on that, and it can evolve a little bit where it's like, hey, we do need to know at some point, like
Yeah.
what do you want to do? And so like, okay, I'll wait for this player. But other ones I need to kind of move on. Like we get this one, this is very special, so I will be on their timetable. Um, but like to do that, and I also like to do like, what do you think your strengths are on the court? What are the differences between your role in your AU team? What are the differences and versus your high school team? And I like to get them idea of thinking about what their game is like. Because, sometimes you can ask players, where do you like the ball? How do you like to score? And sometimes, maybe they haven't thought about it or maybe they don't know. It's like, well, you should know that. You should know, like, I like the ball on the right block, or I like to shoot threes from the left wing. And so just kind of get them thinking about the game, because that's how we try to also run our program, where I don't want to dictate everything for you. I need you to kind of know what your strengths are. So then, all right, let me get you the ball there and
Hmm.
and those kinds of things. So I want to also make sure we get into the basketball part and know what their strengths are. And then also ask them, hey, what do you want to work on this year? So it's just kind of getting into that. And then of course the first phone call, you give your whole spiel about who you are, what you've done. And every time I give that, I'm just like, who cares? Like I sound silly, but I've done it so many times, but you do
Hmm.
have to give that. And also I'm like, gosh, how long was I just talking? And so, and I try to open the floor to them a little bit.
Yeah, you always have your little script ready to go
Hmm.
and like are you looking for that student athlete to ask you questions? I've gotten many different answers from coaches where they're like, if you don't have any questions, don't ask me any questions. And some are like,
Yeah.
no, you should definitely have questions. So kind of where do you fall on that scale?
if they have questions, great. That's always like, okay, I can tell they've written this down or they have it on their phone or whatever. And that's the same thing with some of our player meetings that we have where I'm like, are they going to get out their phone and go through the questions, I think? Or is this going to be just like, here's what you didn't know.
Hmm.
Um, so I asked them, hey, do you have any questions? And sometimes like, no, you covered it. I think you covered everything in the conversation. And I'm always like, hey, if you do, shoot me a text, send me a call. If your parents have any questions, definitely do that. Either way, I'm not, if they don't ask questions, I'm like, oh, they're not prepared. Uh, but if they do, we'll certainly answer them. And I think that's also a sign that they've thought about it a little bit. But I don't really, if they don't, especially the initial conversation as we're growing to get more comfortable, it's okay. But we certainly have those ones who are like this. And I encourage them in this process at Hopkins, anywhere I've been, I'm like, ask questions of coaches that you have specifically. If it can be like, where am I on your board?
Hmm.
How many players are you recruiting at this position? When do you need to know? What are the academic requirements, or if you have a school where there is like maybe academic scholarships, hey, you can direct them to admissions. But I do encourage them to ask questions and, whether coaches will answer them or whether they'll, kind of punt a little bit. Like I think for this year, a lot of people even were asking me questions. I'm like, we don't know exactly where we are in that class yet because I have to see our team. I have to
Hmm.
see, where we're at. So, but I think questions are very good for recruits to ask. And don't be afraid to ask questions in these situations because it is your future that you're
Hmm.
that you're trying to figure out. So ask away.
Yeah, I always encourage like those very direct questions of like, where do you see me? Because
Hmm.
the sooner you know, like it's just the same thing like knowledge. Like the sooner you know that information, you can make a more informed decision about what
Exactly.
you want to do. And I mean, some coaches may give you a very straight answer. Some coaches might just try to like kick the can down the road. But like
Hmm.
what people don't say says a lot too, right? So
Yeah,
it's just about like listening and asking the questions because like you said, it's your future.
exactly.
Like
Exactly.
take charge of that. So what do you see as like the student athlete and slash their parents? So it could be a different answer and their parents' role in the recruiting process.
I look for um, parents who are supportive and allow their child, whoever, to kind of speak for themselves. And I sometimes you see it where maybe the parents are excited and they're obviously very supportive and big fans of their child. But sometimes they're answering all the questions, or I don't want to speak for so and so, but she's really this and that. Um, but you also know that sometimes that's how the pattern has they fall into that communication style where it's like maybe mom or dad jumps in, so they're used to deferring a little bit.
Hmm.
But when the parents are there and allow their kid to ask questions, and then they can chime in a little bit here and there, and then ask their own questions, which I want them to. It's a family decision, but I certainly want the student athlete to speak up and take kind of the lead in the conversation that we're having, just so I know that maybe you look out for overbearing parents, and I can't tell anyone how to be a parent. I would never do that, but I also don't want them to be so involved with everything where they are talking to us, especially once they get to college. In high school, it's different. Like, I want to be there for the recruiting process, talk about things, let's do all that. But I like to see when the student athlete is very good at having those conversations with adults. But again, I understand like there's different maturity levels there and different comfort levels. And it's also nice to see people grow in their maturity as they get older, because the parents love them. They want what's best for them, and they're not ever trying to do anything other than that. And so that's why it's not a blanket statement. But I'm certainly looking for if dad is talking 90% of the time, then that might be something that I think about.
Hmm. Yeah, just like to know again, like
Hmm.
knowledge, just like gathering that information.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the transition a little bit. So that transition from high school to college can be, stressful in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
But what are some, proactive strategies that you can recommend for athletes to excel academically and athletically?
I think if you know anyone who's been in college before, obviously you're gonna have teammates who've been there, but if you have any older siblings or friends, AU people who've just gone through that, like seek out their experience, like and ask them what was very hard, like what was it like adjusting, how were your teammates? And then I think you should have the support within the program, especially if you have a good program with good leaders, but kind of know what you're getting into with people who have just gone through that, who you already know, and they can help you, because it's going to be ups and downs, and you're adjusting to new coach, new style of play, perhaps new teammates, new city, you know, you have to live with someone. Most of these folks have their own rooms, so then you're like sharing a room with someone who you don't know. And, some schools they partner up teammates. We don't do that. So then you're going to get someone who might not like that you have to get up at 7 a.m. for workouts or something like that. And so just be prepared for those kind of scenarios, and be ready like to learn, and just know that there's a lot that you don't know. And you're going to feel a lot of different emotions, go through a lot of different things, but if you can just try to be as much of a sponge as possible and give yourself over to the program and learn from your teammates, that's going to be the best bet. I think the worst thing sometimes you can do is like, oh, this is how we did this in high school, or this is what we had in high school, or this is how my AU program did it. And that's beneficial in terms of, whether it's your own workouts and that knowledge that you've gained from that experience. But if you're comparing it, and you find yourself, oh, I like the way we did this, then you're kind of setting yourself back a little bit. You have to like be completely bought in and sold to what you're doing. And I kind of hate the term bought in, but you have to make sure that you're giving yourself over to the process of where you're at now, and take the foundation that you have, but know that, things are going to be a little bit different. And if, as long as you don't fight it, you're going to make the gains and be as successful.
And so, like, do you have in your mind some prepackaged on-court skills that you expect from like the first years, and you can split up like guards and posts?
Yeah. What I have learned is that you never really know. I just don't think you can't really assume anything, from when people come in. So you just have to make sure you teach it. And ideally, you've seen enough to know what their strengths are, from when you watch them in games, and maybe you can get to a bunch of practices. And if you know the program and know what they teach, there's there's some benefits to that. But your help defense might be a little bit different. The way you teach finishing around the rim is going to be different. The communication is sometimes different. So um, I've really learned not to assume anything, and you teach it, and then, oh, so this person gets it. Maybe they just pick things up quickly. Maybe this is the way they did it in high school, and so. I think in terms of that, we look for that when we're watching games, but I'm never really surprised about something like people kind of maybe struggle with if it wasn't emphasized enough, because there's so many different ways to run a team and run programs. And so sometimes I'll give, and I might even do it more, but I'm like, hey, I want our sophomores to plan 30 minutes of practice. And so they'll bring in a drill from maybe high school or AU, and then I'm like, some of the drills that they brought in, because I did it with most of our classes, we've like used. And so I like to also make sure that they know the stuff that they've done in the past is good and valid, and go from there. So no, I'd say, be a skilled player, and we'll work with what you got.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know if my phrasing of that question was very good, but I enjoyed your answer. So I'm glad that I asked it. But Are there any skills that you've noticed that you've maybe had to teach a little bit more to like throughout your years? I'm sure there have been waves of like just different trends you can notice, but like
Hmm.
thinking in the last couple of years, are there anything that you feel like, oh man, that's not as strong and I need to teach this or emphasize this a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess shot selection maybe. Um, I think with where the game has evolved to, like back when I played, um, not as much of emphasis on three-point shooting, and it was in the sense that if you were a three-point shooter, shoot them. But now I think the line has dropped a little bit about what qualifies as a three-point shooter, or even like shooting long twos and the analytic side of it, where it's like,
Hmm.
hey, I don't a baseline 15-foot jumper on a fast break is not a shot that I want to see, ever. I think there's maybe a couple people that I would be like, okay, I still would be like, get behind the three-point line or get to the rim,
Hmm.
and that would be difference. And so I think, you've seen an increase of the maybe the quick threes, or maybe even like, more step backs, when it's like, okay, I don't think you make enough consistently just standing there and shooting. And so I think just talking about what the kind of shots that we want, what's good for you, what's good for our team. I guess I think that is a skill.
Hmm.
And that's a big thing that we try to talk about, emphasize. We want to try to attack the paint, get to the free throw line. We want to take open threes. And then I think the shooting percentage, what you would see back, in the day, I think it's the acceptable numbers going down. The three-point line has moved back as well. And so, what qualifies as a good three-point shooter or a great three-point shooter, I would, you're 33%. Um, that's pretty good. Whereas I think, when I played, that would just be okay. Just because, the line was shorter and you shot less of them. And so the people who were three-point shooters, that's what they did. And so now I think more people shoot threes, which is what I want. Um, but we have to make sure we're getting the right shots from the right people. That's something that I think the big adjustment is.
All right, so I just looked at the clock, and so we're kind of at the end here. But I wanted to ask the last couple questions that I ask all guests. And the first one, what book or podcast would you recommend for every incoming first year to read before or listen to before the first season begins, and why?
I think just with the whole sports and basketball, I really like Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's book, um, with Nike. I say that because I also just like the idea that players and athletes still read. And I think that's a tie-in. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about a Nike book when we're at Under Armour school. Read a book by the Under Armour founder. But I think that's just a good book in terms of like you can see the connection with sports, and it's a good read. And it's just, I think, a fun book. I do really think the podcast stuff that JJ Redick does, I think is very good because he has excellent guests on there, who play basketball, who are around basketball, and it's kind of a break from like just the opinion factory that's out there. And so he has, his podcast with NBA people, with WNBA people, and I think you can get an idea of the training that these athletes do and their process and routines. And so you can understand that, wow, this is what they're doing. I need to maybe assess exactly what I'm doing to make sure I'm playing my best. And
Hmm.
so I think if you can listen to a lot of the podcasts that he has, because he puts out a lot, and it's very informational, and it's also entertaining. So I think if you want to maybe get an idea of what some coaches listen to, where we get some of our ideas, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I like the stuff that he puts out. It's agree with everything that you said about it.
Yeah.
Um, so what's something in the about the recruiting process or transition to college that you believe that other coaches might disagree with?
I just think embracing like the fact that as much as possible, this might not be any different, but I really value individuality. Like, um, I'm a basketball coach, and this is what I've chosen to do with my career. But I really I want to know what you do outside of basketball, and I want us to kind of celebrate that. I want to celebrate the differences in the team, whether it's through music, whether it's through shows, where you're from. Like, what do you like to do when we are not here in the gym together? Like, oh, you like to read, you like to go to concerts. I've been able to bond with players who go to different concerts and talk about that. Oh, the ones who went to a Beyonce concert or tried to get tickets to Taylor Swift, um, and different things around the city. It's like, one of the players has really gotten into tea and like talking about that. I want to know who you are outside of basketball, because basketball is not going to be forever, even if you coach, but for most of them, they're going to get into something else. And knowing that you have an identity outside of basketball is helpful. It's going to be helpful if you go through unfortunate injuries. Once it's done, saw that a lot at Division I, that transition can be very hard. So we really, and I don't think I'm not saying this is reinventing the wheel here, but I'm really interested in what you like to do outside of basketball, because while I think we can be very focused and we're going to work to be great at this, you got to be well-rounded, I think. And so I want to know what else you spend your time on, and it can't just be basketball.
And last but not least, any final words of wisdom? And if you've said it all, you can just say, mic drop, I've said it all.
I've said it all. No, I think just take control of the process as much as you can for yourself, and figure out what's going to be best for you. Definitely do your research and don't just let it kind of just float out there and think it's just going to happen by chance. Make sure you're really advocating for yourself, learning how to do that. It's going to help you when you get older too. And so I think that would be my advice.
Cool. And then if anyone wants to keep up with Hopkins or, find out what's going on campus, where can they follow you all?
Yeah, hopkinssports.com is our website. We're on X and Instagram, like JHUWBB, and then Coach Rod Rogan those are my socials. So we're on both of those as well. And definitely, follow up for everything. We have a great communications department who put out some really cool videos for us, and our assistant coach Alexis, she does a lot of our social media as well. So it's fun to see that. You can meet the team, see our camp information as well. So definitely check us out.
All right, cool. Well, Rodney, I appreciate the time and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're looking for more specific recruiting advice based on your situation, head over to hoopsthroughlife.com today to schedule your free 30-minute strategy session with me. We will discuss where you currently are in the recruiting process, where you want to go, and create a plan to get you there. Again, that's hoopsthroughlife.com, hoopsthroughlife.com. And if you have any questions for me or questions you want me to ask future guests, you can email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com. That's EL@hoopsthroughlife.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon.